The interrogation chamber was built for silence. Every surface gleamed with a sterile, mirrored sheen that swallowed sound and reflected only unease. Commander Trevan of the Virex Dominion stood at its center, his jointed limbs rigid, the faint hiss of respirators the only sign of life beneath his segmented armor. Before him, sitting at the table with his hands folded, was the last living human, Captain Elias Ward. Trevan had expected defiance. He had expected violence, perhaps pleading. Instead, the man merely sat still, his eyes, the color of burned metal, fixed on Trevan with unnerving steadiness. There was no visible fear, no anger, no exhaustion. Merely a calm so deliberate it felt like provocation. The Dominion had broken worlds before. They had extinguished empires older and more advanced than humanity. Yet this war had been different. The humans had fought beyond reason, ambushes that turned to massacres, fleets destroyed but never surrendering, cities that burned themselves rather than kneel. The Virex had won, yes, but it had not felt like victory. The human species was gone, and somehow, the silence of that extinction had become unbearable. Trevan opened the data slate before him. The flickering symbols displayed the objective: extract knowledge of Project Archon, a human psychological weapon of unknown parameters. He had read the briefing thrice, but it made no sense. No biological residue, no mechanical traces, only whispers that human soldiers would stare into death and laugh. He broke the silence. "You are Captain Elias Ward of the Terran Defense Union." The human inclined his head slightly, neither confirming nor denying. Trevan continued, his mandibles clinking faintly as he spoke. "Your resistance cost both sides greatly. The Dominion seeks understanding. Project Archon, what was it?" For a moment, nothing. Then, the human's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." The translator implanted in Trevan's thorax rendered the words perfectly, but something in the tone bypassed mechanical filters. It was not arrogance or defiance. It was pity. He recorded the reply, suppressing irritation. "Belief is irrelevant. Information is required." "You already have it," Elias said. Trevan paused. "Explain." The human met his gaze directly. "You're shaking." It took him a moment to understand. His lower limbs were trembling, subtle vibrations rattling against the cold floor. Reflexively, he stilled them. "A malfunction," he said evenly. "Continue." Elias leaned back in his chair. "You don't know what you're dealing with. You think you ended a species. But we don't end that easily." Trevan's secondary hearts accelerated. He forced his breathing steady. "Your planet is dust. Your colonies are ash. You have no ships, no soldiers, no children. What remains?" The human's voice softened. "Memory." The word hung between them like a blade. For reasons he couldn't articulate, Trevan felt the chamber grow smaller. The air thickened. He ordered a neural scan. The sensors reported no telepathic field, no psionic interference. Still, the unease spread. His training reminded him, fear was a chemical misfire, an evolutionary relic. He had been bred out of such inefficiencies long ago. And yet, staring at this quiet creature, he felt the primal weight of something older than his species. Elias's hands rested flat on the table. They were small compared to Trevan's talons, but the fingers seemed carved with purpose, each scar deliberate, each motion measured. "We fought you with machines and failed," he said. "We fought you with flesh and bled. So we learned to fight you with something else." "Project Archon," Trevan said. The human tilted his head. "You're still asking the wrong questions." Frustration crept in. "Then what is the right question?" Elias studied him, expression unreadable. "What happens to the conqueror when there's no one left to fight?" Trevan's jaw flexed, a sign of agitation among his kind. "We continue. Expansion is our nature." "Nature," Elias repeated softly, as though tasting the word. "That's what you think this is, instinct, order, destiny. But you've mistaken hunger for purpose." The alien stiffened. "You presume to lecture the Dominion?" "I don't need to lecture you," the human replied. You'll figure it out soon enough. Something in his tone, that unflinching calm, unsettled Trevan more than any shouted threat could have. The Dominion had records of humans using noise as intimidation, battle cries, sirens, chants. But this man's power came from stillness, from the unbearable patience in his silence. Trevan switched tactics. He projected images into the air, Earth's ruins, cities consumed by fusion fire, oceans boiled away. Your world is gone. There is nothing left to remember. Elias didn't look at the images. You misunderstand memory, he said. It isn't stored in places. It lives in what you touch. He looked at Trevan, eyes steady. You touched us. The images flickered. For an instant, one of the ruined cities showed movement, a silhouette, human-shaped, crossing the debris. Trevan blinked, recalibrated the projector, but the distortion persisted. He shut it off. You are attempting to manipulate perception, he said, though the words sounded weak even to him. Elias only smiled again, faint and slow. No, Commander. I'm reminding you of what's already inside you. There was no recorded human capability for psionic influence. No evidence of neural mimicry. And yet, Trevan could feel something crawling along the edge of his consciousness. Memories that weren't his. The metallic scent of blood, the sound of rainfall on stone, a heartbeat that wasn't synchronized to his own. He stepped back. This conversation is over. Elias didn't move. It never is. Trevan turned toward the exit. His reflection followed him in the chamber's mirrored surface, distorted, trembling, almost human. He stopped, forcing his body still. He looked back one last time. Elias Ward sat perfectly motionless, his eyes following him with that same unbearable composure. Trevan spoke without meaning to. What are you? The human's voice was a whisper, but it carried through the room like thunder. A reminder. The lights dimmed. A low hum rippled through the ship's systems. Nothing unusual, a fluctuation in energy perhaps, but Trevan's instincts screamed otherwise. He felt every pulse of power echo in time with his heart's. He left the chamber quickly, sealing the door behind him. Outside, the other officers waited, their posture uncertain. Status, one of them asked. Trevan's mandibles clicked once before he answered. Subject remains uncooperative. Continue surveillance. He walked away before they could notice the tremor in his voice. In his private log later, Trevan recorded the session summary. The subject displayed no aggression, no deception, and yet prolonged observation induces severe physiological instability. I believe this is an unintentional byproduct of proximity. He hesitated, then added one final line. It never raised its voice, but I've been shaking ever since. Sleep eluded Commander Trevan. The station's lights had dimmed to a faint bioluminescent pulse, yet his mind remained painfully alert. The image of the human's eyes lingered behind his vision sensors, unblinking, unwavering, calm to the point of cruelty. He had faced countless species across campaigns that spanned centuries. Some screamed, some pleaded, some fought until their bodies dissolved under plasma fire. None had sat in silence and made him feel observed. He reviewed the recordings again. Each frame, each sound wave, each pulse of energy was logged with mathematical precision. There was nothing abnormal, no telepathic frequencies, no neural hacking signatures. Yet the data felt incomplete, as if something essential could not be measured. When he slowed the playback to 1,000th of normal speed, he caught it, an infinitesimal shift in Elias Ward's pupils that coincided with every verbal response Trevan had made. Like the human was mapping his reactions, mirroring his rhythm. He tried to dismiss it as coincidence. But that night, when he closed his eyes, he dreamed of a human heartbeat thudding beneath his own carapace. By morning, reports arrived from lower officers. 2 surveillance drones had short-circuited during the night, their cores fried as if exposed to an electromagnetic pulse. No traceable source. Trevan ordered replacements installed immediately, but a thought crept through him like static. What if the human had done it without moving, without tools, without intention? He silenced the idea. Logic first. Fear later. When he returned to the chamber, Elias was exactly where he'd been, seated, calm, the faintest sheen of sweat across his forehead. It was the first sign of human vulnerability Trevan had noticed, and he seized upon it like oxygen. "You tampered with my systems," Trevan said. Elias looked up slowly. "You think everything that frightens you must be a weapon." "This is not fear," Trevan snapped. "It is investigation." The human's lips twitched. "You're shaking again." The tremor in Trevan's claws betrayed him before he could hide it. He folded his limbs close and straightened. "You are attempting psychological manipulation." "I don't need to." Elias's gaze didn't waver. "You're doing it to yourself." Trevan exhaled sharply, expelling a mist of coolant vapor. "Enough riddles. Explain Project Archon." Elias studied him for several long seconds. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "It's not a project. It's a promise." The words hit Trevan harder than he expected. His mind began translating possible meanings, military protocol, encoded oath, metaphor, but none satisfied the growing dread in his chest. "Clarify." "When the first world fell," Elias said, "we realized we couldn't win. Not the way you fight. So we taught ourselves to survive another way. You think we lost, but you're sitting in the middle of our plan." Trevan's internal monitors registered a spike in neural stress. He could not parse the statement. "You are contained. Your species is extinct. Your plan is meaningless." Elias's calm expression did not falter. "Do you really believe extinction ends memory? You killed bodies, not belief." Trevan leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Belief cannot destroy ships. Can it destroy you?" Elias asked quietly. The question burrowed deep, unbidden. The air between them thickened until it hummed against Trevan's exoskeleton. He could hear his own pulse reverberating through the chamber walls. The sensors registered no external source for the vibration. "I don't know what you are," Trevan said finally, "but whatever you're trying to do, it will fail." "Will it?" The human smiled faintly. "Tell me, Commander, how many of your soldiers have requested reassignment since capturing me?" Trevan hesitated. He hadn't shared that information with anyone, not even his aides. Yet the human spoke it, as though reading from his mind. "4," Elias continued. "3 of them claimed they could hear voices while I slept. 1 simply stopped speaking. You keep replacing the guards, and it keeps happening." "That's not my doing, Commander. That's your own minds folding in on themselves." Trevan's composure cracked. "How do you know this?" Elias tilted his head. "Because I see it in your eyes." That was the moment Trevan lost the illusion of control. His species prided itself on intellect unclouded by emotion, on the purity of reason unmarred by instinct. But now, under the human's calm scrutiny, reason fractured into fragments of raw fear. He rose abruptly and signaled the end of the session. The drones escorted Elias back to confinement, but the man's gaze lingered on him until the door sealed. Even after the walls shut, Trevan swore he could feel those eyes on the back of his skull. In the corridor, he ordered all surveillance data encrypted and restricted to his access alone. Then he went to his quarters and locked the door. Hours passed before he realized he was talking aloud. His voice echoed softly in the dark, fragments of the interrogation, questions asked and unanswered. When he stopped, another voice spoke his name, low, human, familiar. He spun, weapons primed, but the room was empty. The sound had come from nowhere and everywhere. He activated his comms. "Security, report intrusion on Deck 7. Static answered him. Then, faintly, a whisper threaded through the interference. "You're beginning to understand." He froze. It was Elias's voice. Impossible. The human was confined 4 levels below. He demanded visual confirmation from the surveillance feed, but when the display flickered to life, Elias sat motionless in his cell, eyes closed, breathing steady. No microphone movement, no sound. And yet the whisper echoed again, clearer this time, as though inside his skull. Trevan deactivated the feed. He paced the chamber until the silence itself became unbearable. He tried to reason with himself, It was stress, a neurochemical imbalance, the result of prolonged proximity to a hostile entity. He would request a psychological evaluation. Perhaps the Dominion had underestimated the human's ability to influence through suggestion. Still, reason did not quiet the trembling. When the next interrogation came, he entered with his weapons disabled and his mind fortified. He intended to speak only once, to reassert control. Elias looked up as he entered. The faintest smile touched his lips. "You didn't sleep." Trevand ignored him. "If you have any knowledge beneficial to your species' memory, share it. Otherwise, this will end." "End," Elias echoed, as if tasting the word.
"You don't understand."
"We don't end." "Not really." Trevand slammed a claw against the table. The sound reverberated through the chamber, like thunder. "Enough of this. Tell me what you are." For the first time, the human leaned forward, and his voice lowered to something almost intimate. "I'm what's left when your kind forgets how to feel." Trevand felt the temperature drop, though no sensor confirmed it. The lights dimmed by a fraction of a lumen. Somewhere deep in the ship, an alarm system briefly flickered and died. The human didn't move again. He simply sat, silent, while Trevand's breath grew ragged. When the commander finally left the chamber, he didn't record the session. He walked through the corridors without destination, aware of every vibration, every echo of his own steps. In his mind, a single phrase repeated, unbidden, undeniable. "You're beginning to understand." He stopped at the viewport and looked out at the endless dark of space. For the first time in his long life, Commander Trevand wondered. Trevand had always believed truth could be dissected, examined, and understood through logic. But logic no longer applied. Every scan, every analysis returned the same result, no anomaly detected, and yet his mind was unraveling one thought at a time. His reflection no longer looked entirely alien. The eyes that met his own seemed deeper, darker, almost human. He had isolated himself for 3 Dominion cycles, refusing contact with his crew. Reports from the upper command went unanswered. The station's morale was collapsing. Whispers of contamination circulated among the officers. Some claimed the human's voice followed them through the ventilation systems. Others said they saw him walking the corridors, though his cell remained sealed. Trevand punished them for spreading hysteria, but the words echoed in his skull long after the punishments were carried out. At last, he summoned himself to face the source again. If the human had infected his mind, then only direct confrontation could reveal the mechanism. He entered the chamber stripped of his armor, only a thin neural interface along his spine, the barest protection between thought and intrusion. Elias Ward waited, as always, unrestrained and unmoved. His posture was that of a priest before confession, not a prisoner awaiting judgment. Trevand stopped across from him. The silence between them pulsed like a living thing. "Commander," Elias greeted quietly. Trevand ignored the greeting. "The Dominion demands closure. You will reveal the nature of Project Archon." The human's gaze drifted downward, almost contemplative. "You still think it's a device?" "It must be," Trevand snapped. "A system. A contagion. Something you released into our minds." Elias looked up then, and there was pity in his eyes. Pure, unbearable pity. "We released nothing. We only showed you what was already there." Trevand's claws flexed. "You speak nonsense." "Do I?" Elias asked. "Tell me, Commander, how many of your species ever asked why they conquer? You consume planets, enslave civilizations, and call it destiny. But what happens when you meet something that refuses to kneel? What happens when you face something that looks into you and sees the emptiness you've been trying to fill?" Trevand's breath caught. For the first time, he realized how quiet the ship had become. No hum of machinery, no footfalls in the corridors. It was as if the Dominion itself were holding its breath. Elias continued softly. "Project Archon was our answer to extinction. We realized you could destroy our bodies, our worlds, our history, but not our meaning. So we made meaning into a weapon. We taught every soldier, every child, that even in death, they would leave behind an echo, an idea so fierce it would outlive memory. You can't quantify that, Commander. You can only feel it. Trevan's pulse surged. His neural interface recorded massive fluctuations across his cognitive matrix, patterns forming and dissolving faster than any machine could interpret. You're describing faith, he managed. I'm describing will, Elias corrected. Faith waits for something to save you. Will decides to save itself. The words resonated through the chamber, not loud but infinite. Trevan's sensors picked up overlapping waveforms, frequencies beyond normal hearing, rising and falling in perfect synchrony with the human's voice. Each syllable seemed to press against the walls, bending the air itself. This is manipulation, Trevan said, though the conviction in his tone was gone. Some hidden transmission. There's nothing hidden, Elias said. You're hearing what your species forgot long ago, the sound of purpose. Trevan staggered. Memories, his own and not his own, flashed before his eyes. A human soldier bleeding out on a red desert, laughing as the sky burned. A child clutching a shard of glass like a blade. A fleet choosing to self-destruct rather than surrender. They weren't images, they were sensations, raw, electric, human. What have you done to me? He whispered. Elias leaned forward, his face a mask of calm. I've done nothing. You opened the door yourself. That's what Project Archon was, a seed planted in every encounter. All it needs is someone willing to look too deeply. The room flickered. Power conduits screamed as though alive. Trevan's vision fractured into layers of light. Across the chamber, Elias's silhouette seemed to split, multiply, one man, then hundreds, each whispering in unison. We are still here. Trevan fell to his knees. The sound was not external, it was inside his head, vibrating through his exoskeleton, reshaping thought into echo. He tried to activate the emergency cutoff, but the controls responded sluggishly, as if the entire ship resisted him. Stop, he roared. You'll destroy us all. Elias rose slowly from his seat. For the first time, Trevan saw weariness in the man's movements, a mortal fragility that made his composure all the more terrifying. You still think this is about destruction. It's about remembrance. Every empire forgets the price of its victories. We just made sure you'd remember ours. The lights went red. Energy fields collapsed in cascades. The ship's AI reported simultaneous system errors across navigation, communication, and life support. Crew members screamed through the comms before static devoured their voices. Trevan looked up. You'll die too. Elias smiled faintly. We already did. The words struck like a blade. In the collapsing light, Trevan saw the human's form blur, dissolve into outlines of pale luminescence. For one impossible moment, it seemed as though Elias Ward was made of light itself, each particle pulsing with the rhythm of 1,000 heartbeats. Then, as the ship convulsed, he was simply gone. The noise ceased. Systems stabilized. Trevan found himself alone in the chamber, trembling. The instruments around him rebooted, displaying nothing but static. The chair across from him was empty. He rose unsteadily. Containment breach, he said into the calm no response. He repeated it twice, then stopped. There was no one left to answer. In the stillness, he realized the hum had returned, not from the ship, but from within his own chest. It was steady, rhythmic, undeniably human. He pressed a trembling hand against his sternum, feeling the pulse beneath. His reflection in the mirrored wall met his gaze. The eyes staring back were his, yet behind them flickered the same metallic calm he had once feared in the human. A whisper crawled through the silence, his own voice and another entwined. Now you've seen what we are. The words reverberated until the lights failed entirely. In the darkness, Trevan finally understood that the Dominion's conquest had not eradicated humanity, it had merely scattered it, particle by particle, into the fabric of every mind that dared to study them. And now it lived in him. The ship drifted in silence, its once perfect geometry fractured by the quiet violence that had taken place within. Commander Trevan sat alone in the observation chamber, surrounded by the remnants of order, dim consoles, dead screens, and the faint echo of systems that no longer obeyed him. The Dominion fleet had cut communication hours ago, deeming the vessel compromised. They would come soon, not to rescue, but to sterilize. He stared into the void beyond the viewport, the cold infinity of stars that once filled him with triumph. Now, they only looked like graves, each one a point of light marking something lost. He could still hear the human's voice, though it had been days since Elias Ward had vanished. Not an echo, not memory. The tone was too vivid, too alive. You can't destroy what remembers you. He pressed his hands against his temples, as if pressure could drive the voice out. But it wasn't inside his mind. It was deeper than that, as if it had written itself into the rhythm of his pulse. When he blinked, he saw fragments, a hand clasping another across a battlefield, a soldier laughing through pain, a planet burning while people sang. None of it belonged to him, yet each image pulsed with unbearable clarity. The main door hissed open, breaking the silence. 2 Dominion officers entered cautiously, weapons drawn. Their armor bore the insignia of the Internal Purity Division, executioners disguised as investigators. Commander Trevan, the taller one announced. By decree of the Dominion Council, you are relieved of command pending evaluation for cognitive contamination. Trevan did not look at them. There's no contamination, he said softly. Only memory. The second officer approached, scanning him with a neurofield device. Its readings fluctuated wildly. His patterns are unstable, the officer muttered. He's mimicking foreign neural frequencies. Human, the first asked. Trevan turned then, slowly, his eyes catching the dim light. For a moment, they seemed to gleam with a human warmth that didn't belong in an alien face. You call them foreign, he said. But you've already begun to dream of them, haven't you? Both officers stiffened. Restrain him, one ordered. Trevan rose before they could move, his voice low but steady. Tell me, when you sleep, do you see their faces? The first officer hesitated. The other's weapon trembled. They're inside all of us now, Trevan continued. Every time we spoke their name, every time we studied their dead, we invited them in. That was their final victory, to be remembered by the ones who destroyed them. The officers exchanged a look of unease. We have our orders, the taller one said, though his tone had lost conviction. Then fulfill them, Trevan replied, spreading his hands. End me, if you can. They raised their weapons, but the moment stretched, suspended in the thick air. The younger officer's finger hovered over the trigger, unmoving. His breathing quickened. The sound of his heart filled the silence. Do you feel it? Trevan whispered. That pulse. It isn't yours anymore. The officer stumbled back, eyes wide. What is this? Trevan smiled faintly. Recognition. The younger one screamed and fled the chamber. The elder hesitated, then backed away, sealing the door. Trevan made no move to stop them. He sat once more, letting the weight of quiet settle around him. Hours, or maybe days, passed. Time had lost meaning aboard the derelict ship. Power cells faded one by one, leaving the observation deck bathed in dim starlight. Trevan began to write, etching into the glass with the edge of a shattered console plate. Each word cut clean through the frost-layered surface. They're not gone. They are continuity. We thought victory was survival, but it was only memory that endured. The human taught me this. His hand paused. The reflection staring back from the viewport no longer frightened him. The features had softened, subtly altered. His eyes looked less alien, more curious, more alive. He resumed writing. Elias Ward never raised his voice, and yet his silence reshaped everything I am. Perhaps this is the true contagion, the understanding that meaning does not end when bodies do. The Dominion will call me corrupted. They will burn this ship. But the fire will not erase what's already written in us. He stopped as the ship's warning klaxons began to moan in the distance. The Dominion fleet had arrived. Through the viewport, he saw their silhouettes, hundreds of perfect war machines arrayed like a wall of inevitability. They would erase all trace of the anomaly to preserve order. Trevan smiled faintly. "You're too late," he murmured. He pressed his palm against the cold glass. For an instant, he imagined another hand pressed against it from the other side, human, scarred, steady. The stars blinked once, as though winking out of existence. When the Dominion's first purification beams struck, the Virex 7 dissolved into light. But somewhere within that radiant flash, a transmission slipped free, unregistered, untraceable. It carried no coordinates, no encryption. Just a voice. "We are still here." The message spread like static through subspace channels, bouncing between systems, slipping into forgotten frequencies. It had no origin and no end. Engineers who intercepted it couldn't locate its source. Some dismissed it as interference. Others listened too long and began to dream of oceans of wind, of faces that spoke without words. On one Dominion outpost, a young technician woke from such a dream with tears he didn't understand. When his commander asked what was wrong, he only said, "I think I remember them." The commander, uneasy, ordered him to report to medical, but paused when he saw the technician's eyes. They burned with the same strange calm that had once terrified Trevan. Across the stars, the transmission continued, patient and relentless. It carried no threat, no demand, only the quiet insistence of existence itself. And far beyond the reach of the Dominion's fleets, where dead worlds slept beneath dust, a signal answered, a heartbeat in the void. Trevan's final log, recovered centuries later, would end with a single line that historians could never explain, written in a language half alien, half human. "Never sit across from a human. You will not survive what you see."